She said it like she was ordering coffee. "Fix the roof and I'll make you my husband." Then she laughed. Not at me, at herself, the way people do when they've said something they didn't mean to say out loud. She turned back to her phone and I stood there on her front porch with my tool bag in one hand and a quote sheet in the other. Not sure if I'd heard her right. I had. "My name is Jack Renner. I'm 38 years old. I do roofing and general contracting out of Barrie, Ontario. I drive a 2017 Ram with a cracked passenger mirror I've been meaning to replace for 2 years. I have a daughter named Phoebe who is 6, who likes dinosaurs and hates socks, and who was in the truck that morning eating a granola bar and drawing in her notebook while I climbed out to knock on the door of the biggest private home I'd ever been paid to look at. The address was on Shanty Bay Road, east of the water. The house sat back from the road on about 4 acres of maples and open lawn, with a long stone driveway and a front facade that told you immediately this wasn't a weekend property. This was where someone lived. Someone with money old enough to feel like furniture. I'd gotten the call through a referral from a guy named Terry at the supply house. He said the woman who owned it needed roof work done, something about flashing near a dormer that had been leaking for 2 seasons. She'd had 2 other contractors quote it, and both had walked away. He didn't tell me why. I found out when I met her. Francesca Holt was standing in the doorway when I came up the steps. She was probably 55, maybe 60, with the kind of posture that doesn't come from yoga. It comes from a lifetime of knowing exactly where you stand in every room you walk into. She had silver hair cut short and a way of looking at you that felt like being read. She was on the phone when she opened the door and she held up one finger without looking at me, which I've learned to accept as a greeting in this line of work. When she finally hung up, she looked at my shirt, then at the truck, then at me. "You're the third one," she said. "Yes, ma'am. Don't call me that. I'm not 90. She stepped aside. "Come in. I'll show you the room." The inside of the house was the kind of clean that means someone else does it. High ceilings, wide plank oak floors, art on the walls that wasn't decorative. It was the kind you look at and feel something shift behind your sternum. There was a library off the hallway with floor-to-ceiling shelves, and a desk that had actual papers on it, spread out like they meant something. She wasn't a woman who used her house as a showroom. She lived in it. She took me to the 3rd floor, a finished room with dormers on 2 sides and a view north toward Kempenfelt Bay. The stain was easy to find, a brown crescent on the plaster above the east dormer, dried now but clearly recent, and below it a watermark on the original baseboard that told me this had been happening for longer than 2 seasons. I ran my hand along the ceiling, found the soft spot, looked at the angle of the dormer. "Can I go up?" I asked. "There's a hatch in the hallway." I spent 20 minutes in the attic. The flashing wasn't just failing. It had been installed wrong originally. Whoever did the dormer addition had used step flashing where they needed continuous, and someone had tried to patch it with roof cement that had cracked and pulled away in about 3 places. It was a bad job hidden under a cosmetic fix. When I came back down, she was standing in the doorway of the 3rd floor room, still on her phone, one arm crossed over her chest. I waited. She finished, looked at me. "Well, the flashing needs to come out completely. Both sides of that dormer. Whatever they put in before was wrong for the application, and whoever tried to fix it made it worse. You need new counter flashing, new step flashing, proper saddle at the peak. The shingles in that section are still okay. I'd leave them unless I find something underneath when I open it up." "How much?" "Depending on what I find under there, between $4,200 and $5,800. She looked at me for a moment. "The last man quoted $11,000. Then he was either lying to you or he genuinely didn't know what he was looking at." Something shifted in her expression. Not a smile, exactly. More like a tension. "When can you start?" "I'm booked through the end of next week. I could be here the Monday after." She nodded. Then she said it. The thing about fixing the roof and making me her husband, and laughed at herself and went back to her phone. I stood there for a second longer than necessary, then walked back down the stairs and out to the truck. Phoebe looked up from her notebook. "Is it a big job?" "Medium," I said. "Are they nice?" I thought about that. "She's interesting," I said. Phoebe accepted this and went back to drawing. I showed up the following Monday at 7:30. Francesca Holt was already awake. There was music coming from somewhere inside. something classical I didn't recognize, and the front door was unlocked with a note on the handle that said use side gate, coffee on if you want it. I don't usually take coffee from clients. It blurs the line, but I'd been up since 5 with Phoebe, who'd had a bad dream and climbed into my bed at 3 in the morning, and then proceeded to sleep diagonally and steal the blankets, so I walked around to the back, left my gear by the ladder I'd set up the week before, and went to the kitchen door. She was at the desk in the library, visible through the open doorway. I knocked on the glass. "It's on the counter," she called, without looking up. The kitchen was old and well used, and I liked it immediately. There was a fruit bowl with actual fruit in it. There was a whiteboard on the wall with a calendar written in 2 different colors of marker, dense with notes. There was a child's drawing stuck to the fridge with a magnet. A horse, I thought, or possibly a very ambitious dog. And for a second I wondered if she had grandchildren. I poured a mug and went back outside. The work itself was straightforward, the way bad work always is once you've cut through the cover-up. I stripped the flashing on the east dormer by 9, found what I'd expected. Improper underlayment, a gap at the dormer cheek that had been filled with caulk instead of being properly sealed. I took photos. I always take photos now. Not for myself, for the clients, because people need to see what was wrong before they can trust what you're doing right. Around 11, Francesca came outside. She was wearing a different kind of clothing than the day I'd met her. Work clothes, almost, dark trousers and a linen shirt, sleeves rolled up. She stood on the lawn and looked up at me. "How does it look?" "Worse than I thought, but fixable." I held up my phone, leaned down. "I'll send you these." "What am I looking at?" "The gap there. That's been open to weather for probably 3 or 4 years. The caulk whoever used was exterior grade, but it's not rated for that temperature differential. It goes hard in winter and pulls away." She studied the photo. "The people I bought this house from told me the roof was done 2 years before the sale. This section might have been. Doesn't mean it was done right." She looked at me then. "Not the reading you look from the first day. Something quieter." "You're not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" She almost smiled. Someone who'd tell me what I wanted to hear. I went back to work. By Wednesday, I'd finished the east dormer and started the west. The weather held, which is never something you count on in October in Ontario, and I found myself settling into the job the way I do when a house is worth the work, when the bones are good and someone has cared for it. I learned things about Francesca Holt the way you learn things about people when you work in their space without being their guest. She was up by 6 every morning. She worked constantly. Not anxiously, not compulsively, but with a focus that had become habit over decades. She took one call in the afternoon that lasted over an hour, pacing the lawn while she talked, and from the fragments I caught it, had to do with a deal of some kind. Numbers I won't repeat because I didn't fully understand them, and it wasn't my business. There was a woman who came Tuesdays and Thursdays to help with the house. Her name was Berna, and she was the one who told me things I'd have otherwise pieced together wrong. Francesca Holt had founded a logistics company in the late 90s, sold it 15 years later for a number that made the news briefly, and had been doing what Berna called building things ever since. She'd been married once, briefly, a long time ago. She had no children of her own, but there were 2 nieces she was close to, and one of them had a daughter, the horse or ambitious dog artist on the fridge. She doesn't usually let contractors use the kitchen. Berna told me on Thursday, handing me a second mug without being asked. "Just so you know." I didn't know what to do with that, so I said thank you and went back up the ladder. On Thursday afternoon, Phoebe got off the school bus to find me still not home, and my neighbor Cheryl, who I pay $30 every afternoon she's needed, texted to say Phoebe wanted to know if she could come to the job site. Said yes before I thought about it too carefully, and at 4:15 a car pulled up the driveway. Cheryl's, Phoebe in the back, and my daughter came running across the lawn in her school shoes holding her backpack by one strap. "Dad, this is huge." "It's a big house," I agreed. She stood with her neck craned back, looking up at the dormer. "Did you fix the hole?" "Working on it." Francesca Holt came out the front door then, presumably to see whose car had arrived, and stopped when she saw Phoebe. Phoebe, who has no concept of strangers being strangers, looked at her and said, "Hi. Are you the lady who owns this house?" Francesca looked at her for a moment, then at me, then back at Phoebe. "I am," she said. It's really nice. We drove past a house like this once when Dad was looking for work, and I asked if we could buy it, and he said maybe someday. Phoebe considered this. We haven't bought it yet, I said. What? It's true. Francesca Holt did something I hadn't seen her do in 4 days. She laughed. Not the short, reflexive laugh from the first morning, an actual laugh, full and unguarded, and it changed her face entirely. Would you like to see inside? She asked Phoebe. Phoebe looked at me. I looked at Francesca. She raised her eyebrows, which I interpreted as an honest invitation. Sure, I said. I stayed on the roof. Phoebe was inside for 45 minutes. When she came back out, she was carrying a book, something about migratory birds with illustrations, that Francesca had apparently given her, and she had a look on her face I recognized. The look of someone who has just been taken seriously by an adult they hadn't expected to take them seriously. She has a whole room with just books, Phoebe said. She said I could come back and pick another one when I finished this one. That's very generous, I said carefully. She asked me about school. Not like a grown-up way, like she actually wanted to know. I finished packing up for the day. I didn't know what to say about any of it, so I said nothing. I wrapped the West Dormer on Friday. The following Monday I came back to do the final inspection, seal the ridge cap, and clear the last of the debris off the lower slope. I was on the roof for most of the morning, and when I came down just before noon, Francesca was standing by the back door with 2 mugs. Come inside for a minute. I cleaned my hands on a rag, left my boots at the door, and followed her into the kitchen. We sat at the table, me on one side, her on the other, and she pushed a mug toward me. I want to ask you something, she said. Okay, the original contractor. The one who installed the dormer addition. There's a name on the permit filed with the township. Jeff Morrow Construction. You know them? I did. I knew the name. Anyone who'd worked in Simcoe County long enough knew Jeff Morrow. Not from his good work, from his callbacks, from the jobs that needed fixing, from the insurance claims. I know who they are, I said. He quoted me the work for this house last spring. Different project, some foundation waterproofing on the north side. I signed a contract. He asked for 60% up front. I kept my face neutral. Did you pay it? I did. $43,000. He came, did 3 days of work, then stopped returning calls. The materials he used, I had someone look at it. They weren't rated for below-grade application. I set my mug down. The work you've done this week, she said. The photos you sent. The way you explained what was wrong and why, and what you were doing about it. She paused. I need someone who'll give me a straight answer. Did Jeff Morrow defraud me? This was the moment. I knew it, and she knew it. Jeff Morrow had done jobs for people who referred work to people who referred work to me. Contracting in a mid-size Ontario city is not a large world. There are consequences to saying things plainly. I said it plainly. Yes, 60% up front on a job that size is already a flag. Using wrong materials and walking away is fraud. You should have documentation, the original quote, the contract, proof of payment, and photos of what was actually installed. Take it to the Tarion Warranty Corporation if the work was on the structure. And a lawyer. Not a big firm, someone local who does contractor disputes. She looked at me for a long moment. You know this could get back to him, she said. I know. Doesn't bother you. It bothers me a little, I said honestly. But you asked me a straight question. I'm not going to give you a crooked answer to protect somebody who did you wrong. She was quiet. Then, why not? People do it all the time. I thought about Phoebe, who tells the truth so automatically that it hasn't occurred to her yet that lying is an option. I thought about what I want her to see when she watches me make decisions. Because I have a daughter, I said, and I'm trying to be someone she can point to. Francesca Holt looked at me for a long time after that. Long enough that I started to feel the weight of it. Then she said quietly, My lawyer's name is Patricia Osey. She's in Barrie. Tell her I sent you if you ever need anyone. She's good. I'm not the one who needs a lawyer. No, but you will be, she said. You're the kind of person who ends up standing between the wrong thing and someone who can't stand for themselves. It happens to people like you. It's useful to know a good lawyer. I didn't have an answer for that, so I drank my coffee. I sent her the final invoice that evening. She paid it the same night, which doesn't happen, and added $200 she called materials overage that I hadn't charged her for and wouldn't have. I should have called the next day to say the extra wasn't necessary. I didn't. I told myself it was because I was busy. I had a quote in Innisfil on Tuesday, a gutter job in Oro Medante on Wednesday, Phoebe's parent-teacher conference on Thursday afternoon. All of that was true. None of it was the reason. The reason was that I wasn't sure what to say, and I've learned that when I'm not sure what to say, it's usually better to be quiet until I am. 3 weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Patricia Osei," the woman said. "Francesca Holt gave me your name." I pulled over to the side of the road. "She's filing a civil claim against Jeff Morrow Construction," Patricia said. "The documentation she has is strong. She wanted you to know. She also asked me to tell you something else." "What's that?" There was a brief pause. She said, and I'm quoting here, "Tell him the roof hasn't leaked once." I laughed. I didn't mean to, but I did. It was the kind of laugh that comes out when you've been holding something and you didn't know you were holding it. She also asked. Patricia continued, and I could hear the precision in her voice, the care of a person reading exactly what they were told to read. "Whether you'd be willing to provide a written account of the technical issues you found on site, as context for what Morrow's original work caused." She said there's no pressure and no obligation. She said you'd already done more than enough and that she was asking anyway. I was sitting in my truck on a gravel shoulder somewhere between Barrie and Cookstown, and the trees on either side had gone orange and amber in the way that Ontario trees do in November, holding the color right until they don't anymore. "Yes," I said. "Tell her yes." I wrote the statement. 3 pages, technical language where it needed to be, plain language where that was clearer. I'd never written anything like it before. I sat at the kitchen table after Phoebe went to sleep, with a cup of tea going cold beside me, and I tried to say exactly what I'd seen and exactly what it meant. Phoebe found me there at midnight, padding out in her socks, no shoes because she hates socks and also hates shoes. This is her consistent position, and climbed into the chair beside me. "What are you writing? For who?" "For a woman I did a job for. She needs help with something." Phoebe considered this. "The lady with the bird books?" "Yes." She leaned against my arm. "Is she okay?" "She will be," I said. Phoebe stayed there a few minutes, which is her version of keeping me company, then went back to bed. I finished the letter. I emailed it to Patricia Osei the next morning. I heard nothing for 2 weeks, which I expected. Legal things move slowly and quietly until they don't. I went back to work. I did a full re-roof on a Century home in Angus, a bathroom reno in Midhurst that went longer than quoted because the subfloor was a surprise, and I fixed a fence for an old man on Ann Street, who paid me in cash and homemade peerages, which is the best I've ever been paid for a fence job, and I stand by that. Phoebe read the bird book. She told me at dinner one night that Arctic terns migrate from the Arctic to Antarctica and back every year, which is something like 70,000 kilometers, and that they do it mostly alone. "That's a long way to go by yourself," I said. She thought about it. "Maybe they don't think of it that way," she said. "Maybe they just think of it as going where they need to go." I looked at her across the table. She was eating macaroni and not looking at me, unbothered by the fact that she'd just said something that hit me somewhere under the collarbone. 6 years old. She floors me constantly. The call from Francesca Holt came on a Thursday in December, early evening. I was in the middle of making dinner, fish tacos, Phoebe's current request every night until she abruptly stops requesting them, and I almost didn't answer. "Jack," she said. "It's Francesca." "Hi. The claim is proceeding. I won't bore you with the details." I called to say thank you, not for the statement, though that was essential and I'm grateful, but for the conversation in my kitchen, for telling me the truth when you didn't have to. I turned the burner down. "You asked me directly?" "People ask directly all the time," she said. "Most people still find a way around it." I didn't know what to say, so I said, "I hope it goes well for you." A pause. "I also called," she said, "because I have a colleague who owns a commercial building in downtown Barrie, 4 stories. It needs a complete mechanical and exterior assessment, roofing, drainage, windows, the works. It's a significant project. I told him about the work you did. He'll be calling you." I leaned against the counter. "Francesca, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she said. "That's not why I'm doing it." Another pause, shorter this time. "There's also something else I want to say, and I'm going to say it badly, so bear with me." I waited. "The morning you brought your daughter here, when she came inside and we talked." about birds and school and what she wants to be when she grows up. She stopped. She told me she wants to build things. Houses, bridges. She wasn't sure, but she said her dad taught her that if you understand how something works, you can fix it when it breaks. And that's almost a philosophy. I was quiet. "You're doing a good job," Francesca said. "I know that's not what you called me about, and it's not why you fixed my roof, and it has nothing to do with anything, really. I just thought someone should say it." I stood in my kitchen with the fish tacos in the pan behind me, and I didn't say anything for long enough that she said, "Jack, I'm here," I said. "Thank you. Merry Christmas," she said. "To you and your very forthright daughter." I laughed. "Merry Christmas, Francesca," the colleague called. His name was David Park, and he owned a building on Dunlop Street that had been deferred maintenance into a slow emergency, and the project took most of the following spring and into summer, and it was the largest single contract I'd ever signed. I brought on 2 other guys to help. I bought a new truck. Not new, a 2021 with lower mileage, but it didn't have a cracked mirror and the heater worked properly, which matters more than people think when you're driving to a job site at 6:30 in January. Phoebe noticed the truck immediately. "It's a different color," she said. "Same color, just cleaner." She accepted this with the particular grace of a child who knows when a parent is being gently evasive and has decided to let it go. I don't know what will come of Francesca Holt's legal case. That's her story to tell. I know it's moving forward, which is more than most people get. I know Jeff Morrow has 2 other complaints filed against him now with the Ontario College of Trades, which I found out from Terry at the supply house, who tells me things I didn't ask to know because that's who Terry is. I know that Phoebe finished the bird book and went back to the house on Shanty Bay Road with me one Saturday in March, because she'd been invited and because she asked me 3 times if we could go, and Francesca met us at the door, and they disappeared into the library for an hour, while I sat in the kitchen with coffee and listened to the 2 of them argue, pleasantly, about whether penguins count as impressive given that they can't fly. For the record, Phoebe thinks they're more impressive because of it. I think she might be right. I taped the picture she drew that afternoon, a bird, this time clearly a bird with a long beak and one slightly too large wing, to the front of the refrigerator when we got home, right beside the grocery list, under the magnet shaped like a maple leaf that she picked out herself at a gas station in Aurelia 2 summers ago. I stood there and looked at it for a minute before I started dinner. It looked exactly right where it was,